Voyager J! Finally, we get another ship that has letters after its designation to indicate a new generation of that ship name. Up until now, it's just been Enterprise. Good to bring in, some other ship names to that little club. Hi, I'm Phil, welcome to my channel where I talk about all the geeky pop culture that I love and consume, including Star Trek. Don't know why I said it like that, just Star Trek. Anyway, we're talking about the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery. Had to check my notes. It was called Die Trying. I watched it yesterday, not today. Usually I record my reviews within like an hour of watching the episode, but I was a bit busy yesterday, I had some family stuff, so I didn't get to record that, which is why this is a day later than usual. Sorry. It also meant I forgot the name of the episode, but it's called Die Trying. I've got it on my notes. So this episode finally sees them reunited with what's left of the Federation and Starfleet. Something that I thought was going to take them a lot longer to get to be frank. I thought it was maybe going to be a whole, at least half the season before they... Well, maybe it is half the season. What episode are we up to? I forget how short these seasons are. They're only like 10 episodes, aren't they? I suppose it's not that far off the halfway point of the season. It just kind of feels like it's happened really quickly, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because then they're not dragging it out. They can move on to other things, like examining what happened with the burn and the other mysteries, some of which are set up in this episode. But they get there, and of course, Starfleet, the Federation, still a very bureaucratic, protocol-driven organisation, and so there's some conflict there. And they're not used to the ways of doing things, and they encounter a little bit of resistance there. And then there is a mission element to the episode as well, which they get sent off on to do to rescue some seeds, basically. And this whole episode, for my general thoughts, I would say it's kind of the mirror of the episode where they go to Earth, in my view. Because that episode felt like it did a lot of moving pieces into their relevant bits. Both of these episodes spent the first sort of section of them, maybe the first 20 minutes or so, positioning the things that will play into the universe later on. And then there's a sort of episodic plot element that kicks in about 20 minutes in. And I felt both of them did that, but they kind of, in terms of the quality of those elements, they kind of flip. Because if you watched my review on the one where they visit Earth, I was very much feeling that the first 20 minutes dragged quite a bit in where they were moving the chess pieces around and setting things up and, getting Burnham back and all that sort of stuff. And it just felt like it was dragged a little bit. But I really liked once the Earth Defense Force beamed on board and the general plot of the episode started ramping up. I really liked the rest of the episode. Here, it's kind of the reverse. I actually really liked the interaction with the Starfleet Admiral and all of the stuff in that section. I don't really have any quarrels with it at all. And then the plot element comes in, where the sort of episodic plot element where they are sent off on a mission to retrieve these seeds and to potentially rescue the people on board. And there I have some issues. I'm going to use a word that I used for the very first episode as well. The plot element felt a little bit hollow, and it just didn't keep my interest. In fact, I found myself getting distracted away from the screen a bit during that, and then I sort of suddenly realised that, oh, hold on, I've missed something important here. But if it couldn't hold my attention completely for that section, there was just something lacking in it. Not that there weren't some good moments in it, and not that it was bad, it just wasn't the best it possibly could have been, and it kind of felt a little bit like it was there to get rid of a character and to get rid of a character and to prove themselves to Starfleet. So it felt like it was something that felt a little bit, I don't want to use the word forced because I hate that word, but contrived maybe, I don't know. It just felt a little bit like, okay, they're doing this, it's not that great, But there were some good moments in it, and I will get to those. But let's talk about some of the other things I really like. When they first got to the Federation outpost, the Federation HQ, we get a lovely scene where they are just entering into the kind of thing behind the force shield. You can't see it from the outside, but once you go into it, there are loads of ships there. And we get a whole load of like them scanning what's around them and listing off, you know, basically a checklist of loads of things to give us a hint of what the future in terms of technology can bring. So they mention organic hulls, ships with organic hulls. Some ships have holographic hulls, which seems a potential health and safety hazard for me, because if somebody attacks and manages to disable the holographic emitters in that, you're pretty screwed. Or the crew, unless the whole crew are holographic as well, which is, I suppose, a possibility. Detachable nacelles as well, which I gather are nacelles which still work but aren't physically attached to the rest of the hull. I think that's what they were implying, because they were saying, where do you keep the warp core and things? Flying rainforests, interesting. And we also get a reference to a Neo-Constitution class. Now, I don't know where they got that information, because how would they know it's a Neo-Constitution class? Or did they just see it and go, hey, that looks like a Constitution class, I'm going to name it a Neo-Constitution there and then? I don't know, but nice little nod. I've seen this since. I didn't pick up on this myself, but I've seen this on Twitter since. That one of the ships is called the USS Nog. A lovely reference, obviously, to Nog from Deep Space Nine, because, of course, the actor sadly passed away fairly recently. I can't remember if it was this year or last year, but the actor who played Nog passed away, so that's a lovely little Easter egg there to reference him. And, of course, we get the Voyager J, which, as I alluded to in my intro, I think, other than the Enterprise, is the first time we've seen a ship which has a letter designation other than the Enterprise. Even when they've had ships that we've seen before, like the Defiant. There was a Defiant in the original series, but the Defiant in Deep Space Nine isn't the Defiant A or the Defiant D or whatever. It's just the Defiant. And there are some other ships where that has happened before as well. This is, I think, is the first time we've had another ship other than Enterprise get a letter designation, which means there've been like 10 or 11 voyages. So that's quite nice. Nice little homage there. Maybe it got that special treatment because it came back from the Delta Quadrant and therefore would be quite a famous ship amongst the Federation, so it got elevated to that status, perhaps. It was just a lovely scene utilising the possibilities of the future setting that they now find themselves in. The technology and the design styles that we see. The only downside, the only negative I really have about this is that we did not see those designs in any particular up-close detail. I think the Voyager hull was the closest we got to one of those ships. A lot of them were very small, and I was watching this on my phone, so incredibly small for me, in the background, and couldn't really see them particularly well. So although you kind of got a rough idea of the shapes, and I'm sure some people have, zoomed in on them and examine them in details. I'm looking forward to the Trek Yards video where they inevitably will do that. But just as a casual watch, you couldn't really see much of those designs, so I would have liked to have seen a bit more, but I'm guessing there was a budgetary reason for that. So they go on board and they meet the Admiral, and there's a bit of a frosty relationship between the Discovery crew, particularly Michael and the Admiral, because the Admiral is very much like, there's no record of you, we don't trust you yet, we have no reason to trust you, so we're going to split up your crew, they'll all be reassigned, the Discovery, we'll work on Discovery, give our upgrades to it, and assign our own crew to it. And so obviously Michael is not happy with that. Obviously we as an audience wouldn't be happy with that actually happening. However, I do think that under the circumstances that the Admiral finds himself in, he is completely justified in that. If you get a completely random crew from 1,000 years ago suddenly turn up and, you want to integrate them into the ways of working that you do now. And it may seem a little bit harsh to break them up from a morale standpoint, and as Burnham points out, they're very fragile. They've left all their friends, their family, everything they know behind. And so they need the support of each other to keep that going. So there's valid points on both sides here. But but as an admiral, you would want them to integrate into the ways that you work now as best as possible. And probably the best way to do that is to split them up and have them working directly with people and learning from people that are of your own way of thinking. So I do understand both sides. So you've got Burnham really kind of pushing back against that, the Admiral butting heads a bit with her, and Saru kind of in the middle, because he really also understands where the Admiral is coming from, but obviously he wants to keep the crew together as well. So he's kind of playing the diplomats here. He sort of, when they're back in private, he scolds Michael a little bit and says, look, I'd really help that, and this happens towards the end of the episode as well, really appreciate it if you did not speak out like that in front of the Admiral, because it reflects badly on me too. So Saru works really well in this episode, and I think it's another episode which really shows his command style and the fact that he's a great captain, and the way he negotiates, has that diplomatic sort of style, but can make the point and stand up for the point when he feels he needs to as well. The uniforms is another thing that I'm not completely sold on yet. I'm not a fan of these new uniforms. They're very grey. They look a bit boring. They're very grey. The weird sort of chest thing that kind of stops just below your sort of pec area, I guess, your chest area. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Maybe it'll grow on me. I don't know. I just kind of hope the Discovery crew don't end up having to wear them. If I was the Admiral, I would insist that they wear them, because, hey, they're part of Starfleet. They should fit in with the rest of Starfleet. But it looks like, certainly in the next episode, they're keeping their old uniforms. So I kind of hope they do, although logically they probably should change. We get some really funny scenes of debriefs in this. The debriefs are potentially my highlight of the episode, actually, because there's the debriefs of a lot of the crew, which is like a little montage scene, which is really fun, really, like, you get to see, people just being amusing. You get Nom only giving her name, rank, and serial number. You get Stamets being Stamets and very, very sort of his arrogant self. You get Tilly being Tilly. And they're just very funny scenes, this little montage of the debriefs. But the debriefs really shine when we get to Georgiou. I really liked these scenes between, not so much the start of it, but when it gets to just her and the shady looking guy with the glasses a bit later on. When she's being interviewed by the holograms. And in fact, one thing that bugged me a little bit was the blinking to destabilize the holograms. I wasn't too sure about that. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. It kind of felt a bit like really gobbledygook, and the way she explains it felt like gobbledygook techno babble, something you might find in Doctor Who, and in a show like that it kind of works. But here it felt a little bit like, hey, let's introduce this weird fun thing to get these people out of the way. I don't know, it just didn't quite work for me, that blinking to get rid of the holograms thing. But once they had got rid of the holograms, that scene between her and the other guy, who at this moment in time I'm presuming is probably a Section 31 agent. Let's assume Section 31 has carried on into this future. He's suddenly dressed in a very different style to everyone else we see from this era in Starfleet, and he's got a slightly different badge, which Georgiou notices, and I think I remember seeing some black on that badge, like the Section 31 badges of her own time. So we get a really interesting conversation between the two of them. He knows she's from the Mirror Universe, and we get to find out a bit about what's happened with the Mirror. I mean, we knew the Empire had fallen already from DS9. The Terran Empire had fallen from their Mirror Universe episodes. But we also find out here that the universes have been growing further apart, and there hasn't been any contact between the two universes for literally centuries, which does visibly, clearly shake Georgiou. But the Terran Empire falling and the fact that she might not be able to get back there seems to shake her quite a lot. And it was really good acting by the actress there, and I think there's some stuff here that's set up, some mysteries here that's set up that will play out throughout the season and may even lead into the Section 31 series, which we've been being told is coming. Whether or not it still does, who knows? But we're told it's still coming. And I think this little plotline here might play into that. So let's talk about the mission they're sent on, because when their Discovery arrives to Federation HQ, they find a situation where there's an alien race which has contracted some kind of disease, and they need the original seeds to go to help them to get some kind of antidote. And the seeds potentially will be on a seed ship that the Federation has out there, with every seed that the Federation has ever encountered on. And initially, obviously, the Admiral really doesn't want them to get involved. He wants to just debrief them, reassign them, integrate them with the wider management structure, command structure of Starfleet of that era, and move on. They'll sort it themselves. But as Burnham points out, they have a spore drive. They can get to this ship instantly. And so she pushes and pushes for this. Saru makes a more diplomatic push for it, and eventually she's allowed to go. Saru stays behind. She takes command of the Discovery, and they go. They arrive to find the ship in a bit of distress. It's in some kind of plasma cloud thing. And they get to sort of show off what they can do to two of the Federation Starfleet observers that have been sent on this mission with them. And we do get to see here Michael being a very effective commander of the ship. In this is probably the first time I've seen where I've actually thought, she might make a good captain. Because when she's on that bridge and giving the orders of what they need to do to, get there and to initially get there, and then when they find the situation that's there, she's very commanding, she's very in control, calm, and actually she looks like a really good captain in that instance. She does a good show for the people that are observing them. So, it's probably the first time I've actually seen it where I've gone, oh, okay, maybe she would make a good captain one day. Because up until now, I've kind of thought, she can be an interesting character sometimes, but I don't see her necessarily as a captain. But this it's good to see that they are introducing those elements. Maybe the series will end one day with her getting a captain, becoming a captain. That would be a nice, narrative end to the whole series. Also in this scene, though, we get to see that Detmer's PTSD is not completely resolved. And that was one of my worries about last week's episode, that they seem to be... That end scene kind of felt like it might be implying in a Voyager-esque way that, hey, we've solved it this episode, they're fine now. It doesn't appear to be that. She's clearly still massively affected by the trauma that she's gone through, and I'm very glad they're going to continue to explore that throughout the series. I'm sure it will keep rearing its head. And, they mentioned, obviously, I already said that they mentioned that the rest of the crew as a whole is very fragile at the moment and needs the support of each other, so needs to stay together. So they are still referencing their situation and how it's affecting the crew's mental state and mental health. So really good that they're not going down the Voyager route of, oh yeah, now we're just into episode of the week, everybody, it's fine at the beginning of the episode type attitude. Once they manage to tractor beam the seed ship out of the immediate danger it is in, they then beam over. It's Burnham, Kolber, and Nom beam over onto the seed ship to try and find the seeds, and they find a kind of slightly, I think that it's one of I forget the species names, but Nom's species that can't breathe in normal in human atmosphere are manning this ship at the moment. And so the atmosphere is all for her species, so all the humans have to wear breathing apparatus. And it's at this point we get to see some nice development for Nom, which we haven't really had up until this point. She's been one of those characters that is there. She has some interesting lines. You get a kind of glimpse at her personality a little bit, but you haven't had really much development for her. And here, because the crew was the same race as her, she hasn't seen any of those of her race because since joining Starfleet, because they weren't members of the Federation at that point. she sort of abandoned her people to join Starfleet. So we get a nice bit of interaction where she's looking through the holograms, and a nice sort of feeling of developing her personality. We get to learn a bit about her culture, that kind of thing, which is quite nice. The crew were mostly dead, which we find out through the holograms. However, the father, it was a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 kids, and the father was saved. It was kind of like a solar burst or something that killed them, but the father was saved because he was mid-transport, but he is kind of stuck in this kind of phasing in and out kind of thing, which they solve quite easily. It's one of those things where they could have played up and this is what I mean about it being quite hollow. Every challenge they find on this ship, they solve quite quickly, and it just didn't seem to be much to grip hold of and keep my interest in terms of the plot going on. The good bit is what we get from Nom, I think, in this. Like, even the mystery of what happened to the family is kind of resolved quite quickly. And we end up, they rescue the guy from the transporter problem, and he's whole again, but he's going to die unless he leaves, but he won't leave his family. And Nom decides to stay with them. And so it kind of ended up feeling a bit like a repetition slightly of what they did with Ariam, which is that she was a sort of very much a side character for a season and a half, and they wanted to write her out, and they gave her character development in the episode they write her out in, which is what seems to have happened with Nom here. She wanted to leave. I don't know if it was the actress, or I don't know what the decision-making process there was, whether it was the actress's decision or the creative's decision, but she was leaving, and so they gave her this sort of bit more motivation, a bit more character development, just to get rid of her at the end of the episode. So I like the character development, but it seems a bit of a shame. And also, her leaving, it didn't quite hit the same emotional notes as Ariam leaving, because although one thing I mentioned back in my review in season 2 of the episode where Ariam died was that despite not having known her much because she wasn't there, they filmed it so effectively and they built up her backstory so effectively, and it was just absolutely beautifully put together that I couldn't help but feel emotionally affected by it when she did die. Maybe it's because Nom's not dying as well. That could also be a factor here, but I just did not feel much when she, made that decision and they left her behind. I didn't feel much in the way emotionally with that decision. So it was it kind of felt like this whole plot was about getting rid of Nom and also just having some way to prove themselves to Starfleet, which they do, and they're allowed to stay together at the end. One little line I like from the assessors when they are watching in engineering, Tilly, Stamets and Jet Reno working together and being very argumentative with each other and snipping back and forth little jibes and things. One of the assessors that is assessing them says, your relationship isn't very professional, and no, it's not, they say, but that's how we work, and we work effectively like that. And so I think it gives a bit of an indication of how the Discovery crew have become very much like a family, very much a tight-knit crew that maybe to the outside world seems a little bit more relaxed than a very formal Starfleet ship might be. So although this wasn't a bad episode, the mission felt a little bit hollow, but I really liked the setup, and I really liked what they sort of set up with the Federation. I thought the Admiral was as I would have expected him to be, and kind of justifiable in his actions, and his butting head against Michael fits with her character, and Saru being kind of stuck in the middle was sort of the perfect balancing act to that. But yeah, the second bit was a little bit hollow and with some nice bits in it. So overall, it was kind of another okay episode. There are things that maybe I would have changed, but it's fine, I guess. Sets up some nice mystery boxes as well for the series going forward. Mystery boxes can always be a bit of a Trojan horse. You never know whether or not they're going to work out or not, whether or not they actually have planned an answer to these, or they're just setting something up in order to leave it open and work out what they're going to do with it later. Hopefully they know what they're doing with it. So there's this bit where Burnham notices that the family on the ship knew a piece of music that also Toll knew before the symbiont knew, that is now in the new crew member that I've forgotten the name of. That's a kind of mystery. I didn't quite understand why they think it's odd that two people, even if they are different sides of the universe, would know the same piece of music. Culture travels, and this is presumably a very old piece of music, so therefore, even before the burn, maybe it spread around before the burn and now people still know it. I don't know, but they're clearly setting it up like it's unusual. And so that's a little bit of a mystery box. What's going on there? Is it related to the burn? Who knows? And also, what's wrong with Georgiou? Because after she comes out of this meeting with Section 31, she's Michael comes across her in a corridor and she's very, she's completely zoned out. And Michael's talking to her and she's still zoned out. And it takes quite a while for her to click out of it. What's going on there? What's up with her? Is it just her emotional state after finding out the fall of the Terran Empire and the fact that there hasn't been any crossover in over 500 years between the universes? Is that what's happening there? Or has the potential Section 31 agent done something to her? Now let's talk predictions. So I'm going to focus on the Section 31 stuff here. I think what's going to happen with the Section 31 stuff is that we're going to get Georgiou getting involved in Section 31 in this time period. Maybe they've done something to her and that's why she's zoned out then. Maybe they've done some kind of programming on her or something like that. And then she is going to, at some point, be sent back by the Section 31 of this era to the past. Potentially using Discovery, potentially not, because we know the Discovery from the short trips Calypso was in a nebula for 1,000 years. Maybe she steals the Discovery, takes it back, leaves it in the nebula for them to find in the next season in the future, or something like that. But then I think she's been sent back to get involved in Section 31 back in the past and change the future. So we might have a divergent timeline coming off from her actions there. That's my predictions. What are yours? What do you think's happening with Georgiou? What was the whole her staring out? Was it just her mental state? Had the potential Section 31 guy done something to her? Do you even think he's a potential Section 31 guy, or am I just barking up the wrong tree there? Let me know everything you think about this episode, all your theories, whether or not you liked the episode, whether or not you hated the episode, all of that sort of stuff in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. I will be back next week for another review of the next episode. I will see you then. Goodbye.